All right. This is Larry Hoy, biker writer legend, and you made it back to the First Chapter podcast, where I introduce you to some of my favorite books, and I give you the first chapter for free. So, let's see what's on the agenda for today, will ya? Fantastic. Hey, guys. Great to see you again. Today's story is Sola-Tay by a buddy of mine, Robert Krog. Robert is actually the first guy who has ever published me. He published my first short story way back when, the road trip to Lynchburg. But today, I've got his fantasy breakout story for you, Sola-Tay by Robert Krog. All right, let's have a look-see at the backside. Exiled, Kara-Et and his adopted siblings found peace at the very edge of the world in a backwater Sola-Tay. So as long as Kara-Et's sword and gift for command can earn coin, solving problems for the local lords. But its youngest siblings, Tarantus, has found a purse of gold that belongs to the chief priest and faces a death sentence, though he's innocent. Saving him will doom the siblings to flee again into further exile, but may purge the region into ruin. For the demigods of Sola-Tay have awakened and will exact a price from all the malefactor is not sacrificed. Boom. All right, Robert, I'm looking forward to it. Sola-Tay, let's get started with first chapter. Chapter 1. Tarantus was taking a shortcut down an alley between the bakery on Flood Street and home on the Avenue of Roses when he turned a corner and saw it. It was a tooled leather bag, a coin purse, the boy surmised, and full of coin. It rested on the cobblestones in the middle of an alley, its strings severed. Forlorn-looking, forgotten-looking, though surely its owner sorely felt its loss. How a cut purse could have dropped it, he couldn't imagine. Nevertheless, there it was. It transfixed him. It wooed him. It was a fine specimen of a money bag. Capacious, sturdy, a handsome leathery brown. Steak, it seemed to sing to him. Wine and chocolates, it seemed to coo to him. Fresh fruit, apples and strawberries, it seemed to giggle at him. He licked his lips and ran his fingers through his straw-colored hair. From 20 feet away, frozen in awe and indecision, he thought he could see it stamped with a gold bar and wheat sheaf, signal of Doomsday, the god of commerce. The laws of Doomsday included the maximum that a finder got to be a keeper. What a thing it was to find and keep. Even if it contained only copper, it would still be enough to keep him and Marcel housed and fed for another month or so. If it contained gold, well, that was a small fortune, several years' worth of living, complete with servants and good food. Well budgeted, it could maintain a brother and sister for more than a decade. It reminded him of the weighty purse of the Marseille, and inherited from their father, which paid for their way across the land and sea when they'd fled the capital city of war to the border town of Sola-Tay, and paid for a house, servants, necessities, and luxuries on arriving in their new home. Surely it was full of gold, or gold and silver at least. No money bag so fine contained only copper coin. He wasn't moving, though. He wasn't rushing forward and picking it up and hiding it under his shirt. He was standing dumbstruck, as if no one else could possibly come by at any moment. He was being coy with a fortune when it favored him. "That's not mine," he said, but he licked his lips and said to himself, "There aren't but half a dozen men of Sola-Tay to whom it could belong, and never more than 2 or 3 foreign merchants in a town at a time who have purses so full either. I'm yours," it seemed to whisper to him. "Take me up and spend my coin as you like." It wouldn't be difficult to find the owner and return it. It would have been even easier to keep it. He took a step forward, eyes riveted. He couldn't leave it there. Someone was going to find it. Plucking up his courage, he strode forward and picked it up. It had the weight and clink of gold. Walking on, he peeked in quickly and saw a yellow gleam, and tucked it under his shirt. he'd decide what to do with it somewhere unseen. "It's not mine," he said again, thinking of their father, the late Meldor, frowning at him from the afterlife. The maximum of doomsday flashed through his mind again. The finder may keep what he finds, so the owner had best not lose what's his. But his father was sternly awaiting his decision in the afterlife of Grimsey, the god of honor. Tarantus had arguments against Grimsey. After all, what was a sense of honor that got his father killed and then banished to the capital, to this strange backwater town of Sola-Tay, the very edge of the world. Grimsey, the god of fortune, had placed a purse full of coins in his path, and the god of commerce said it was well to take it. The two gods, one favored his keeping it for himself and his sister. He exited the alley out onto the bustling avenue of roses and made his way absently through the foot and cart traffic toward home with the purse pressed against his stomach. It was a heavy bag of coins. Surely it was a lot of gold. "Pay back the moneylenders and borrow no more," the gold surely advised him. "Eat meat every day, as you're used to," it suggested, and the ache in his stomach agreed with it. Oh, the chocolates and wine in lieu of bread and water, he thought. Marseille could recall the servants she had been forced to dismiss. No more chores for him. No more going to sleep still hungry. Unbidden, the greatest maximum of Grimsby came to him. Treat others as you would be treated by them. He would want his property returned to him if he lost it. He shoved the thought aside for another moment, thinking of how he might convince Marmelie to accept the money. "Look what fortune has placed in our hands," he would say. "And how was it placed there?" she would ask him, with raised eyebrows and wide eyes. "I found it in an alleyway," he would say. "And whom does it belong?" she would ask, still eyeing him. That gave him pause. His father in the afterlife, the god Grimsby, and Marcel would all frown upon such behavior and even call him a thief. 3-2 against. A live present sister with whom he lived, a trumpeted, distant god, even if a dead father did not. It was at least 2-2. And what of his brother? Carelt was away, but he would be back. It might even be one day soon. What would he say? But then Carelt was supposed to be sending them money to live on, and none had arrived in 4 months. He was delinquent. How much right had he to say anything? But he was the eldest sibling, and surely he was trying. Tarantus found himself paused in the middle of the street, considering. I have to find the owner, he thought, and if I get a reward for my honesty, that's fine. And if I make us a friend, so much the better. But I must find the owner, even if there is no reward. He couldn't live with himself at the thought of their disapproval. How much worse would it be in actuality? He sighed and looked up. There was a mail-covered town's guardman bearing down upon him, a spear in grasp, clearing the way for the Lord. He leapt aside just in time, and the purse slipped from under his shirt and clanked heavily on the cobblestones. Fear shot up his spine. Before he reacted, the guardsman definitely swooped in to retrieve it for him. He knew his face was pale and his hands were trembling as he reached for the bag. "Here you go," said the guard, and he paused in the act of returning it. His eyes grew large, and he shouted, "It's your purse, my lord!" Tarantus' legs were frozen in place, though his nerves shrieked, and he told himself to run. The Lord, a lean man with a pointed black beard and silver circlet on his head, and the emblem of the local god Nior emblazoned upon his tunic, half rose from the sedan chair in which 4 slaves were bearing him and shouted, "Stop, thief!" Too slowly, Tarantus turned to run, and then started to turn back to say, "Wait, I only found it." But the words never left his mouth. The guard, sensible of his lord's wishes, reacted with trained reflexes. The spear butt smashed up in Tarantus's belly and knocked all the wind from his lungs. He doubled up in the air, feet well off the ground, and then down he went. All right, that was a fast chapter. Let's do one more. Chapter 2. Here we are, Chapter 2. As it stood, a bag of gold was a fine thing to have, and Carlt had earned one in the last 6 months, employment as a hired sword. Spolo de Buen, merchant baron of the Empire of War, lord on the edge of nowhere, gratefully put the bag into his hand. When I heard a knight of Greensby was about in the land, I knew he was the one to hire, for I wouldn't have to fear about him abusing the populace or later taking up arms against me. I knew he was a protector of the weak, and him I could trust with any mission. The aging lord smiled at him, showing teeth still white in his weathered brown face. His brown eyes were watery and slightly crusted. "You're too kind," said Carlt, looking down at Spolo's old eyes with his own clear, hard blue ones in a clean-shaven, white northern face he hoped wasn't flushing. Anyway, praise was good, but cash was better. He tied the purse to his belt carefully and wished he were already on his impatient warhorse Dobbs, riding out the gate. I never thought I'd see the end of the goblin infestation. Their theft and destruction and murder of my people, Carl, said the lean old lord, but you seem to have slaughtered the most of them, burned out their nest, and chased off the remainder. You've put me in debt, but I'm grateful to you. Carl nodded with a grave smile on his face. It was an honor to serve you, my lord, he said, bowing slightly. Spolo reached out and let go of his middle-aged daughter's arm, grasping the knight's arm at the elbow, and drew him close for a formal embrace as the custom of the region required. He respected in kind. Our duties to each other have been discharged honorably, said Spolo, and we are free to go our separate ways, but I would not be averse to other partnerships if I can ever afford them again. Guessing that while the old man had spent a small fortune, he had not come close to the bankruptcy at which he hinted, Carlt remained quiet, only nodding again as he took his leave. He mounted tall, black, reliable Dobbs and rode out the gate. Behind him, the soldiers of fortune he led into battle for the old lord's gold lined up to get their pay from the Baron Senchel. Spolo himself, being one of the few remaining worshippers of the old local gods, leaned again on his daughter's arm, retired to the chapel in the main donjon of the castle to make appropriate offerings to the strange, many-limbed, multi-handed local god he worshipped, probably Noblor. Later, Cole felt Spol would draft a letter to the imperial governor to ask for a waiver on some portion of his taxes based upon the expenses he had incurred in making the province safer for all, the goblins having a widespread threat. In the long run, with the tax waiver and the safer province, the old lord would likely profit enough from the endeavor many times over, should he live long enough. Call rolled out from the crosswinds some 2 miles distance from the grim old baronial castle and waited. He wished to say a private goodbye to some of his erstwhile comrades in arms. He tied Dobbs to a willow tree and sat in the shade waiting for them. He looked up thoughtfully at the road signs shaped like wooden arrows. One pointed north towards Arden, a quaint provincial capital. One pointed south toward the very end of the world, Sola-Tay. He turned his thoughts away from them and instead pondered what to say when the others arrived. They took only a quarter of an hour to catch up, riding in groups ranging from 3 to 30. All stopped and hailed with him, bid him a good fortune under the auspices of the god of fortune, Kimsmi, and moved on, taking on the road to the north to Arden. 72 men passed by thus. They had buried but 25 of their own. The curing spells of healers had saved 10 others. The endeavor had been a great success. The last group, just 3 men, Gwell, Strahd, and Ter, his lieutenants for the last 6 months, had waited to one side while the others bid him farewell. They rode over and dismounted. "Captain!" They greeted him in a bass chorus. "This is farewell," he said with a smile, "but a fond one." "Need it be?" asked a 7-foot tall Gwell seriously. "Yes." "You go now to Sola-Tay?" asked a scarred Strahd derisively. "Yes." "The brother and the sisters live there, yes?" asked stout Ter, not believing it, stressing the word sister humorously. "Yes." "It can't be a sister," said Strahd. "Surely it's a lover. Not even family could make a man go all the way to Sola-Tay, that cursed town." Gwale shoved Strahd aside and said, "Never mind the reason, be it true or false. Sola-Tay is the hind end of the world. Wherever it is, take her from there and join us in the capital. It's a better place, and they worship the gods of the Empire, not these local demons." "But they have policies of the Empire there, too," thought Carol, "and the knives of their assassins, perhaps." "No," he said, "my duty is to the south, where my sister." Tara sneered. "Sola-Tay? Even their demon gods were defeated by one of our emperors long ago. Come back with us." "Ah, they worship demons, not gods at all," Strahd asserted. "Being the woman out, they're backwards there," said Gwale. "I know it," said Cartelt, "but I have reasons for being there." Strahd furrowed his scarred brow and then thought and said what he'd long been thinking. "Perhaps with the gold you've won, you could pay back whatever debt you owe, or make whatever bribe you must to get back in the favor and come out of exile." Carl smiled and said, "You're good friends, and I hope to see you again. I hope." "You could try," said Gwale. "There's not enough gold in this province," said Carl. They stared at him in silence as he looked back fondly. "I'll not tarry over long in Sola-Tay," he told him. "I'll be out again before the end of the year, seeking a means of earning more. We may meet again. I'll go then to Arden and look for you. Leave me word in the usual places." Gwale said, "We'd rather serve with you or under your command than with one of the other captains in the land, Carelt. The others don't keep their troops disciplined. They're often little better than bandits or goblins themselves. They're not above the pillage and rape of the people whose side they obstinately serve. Come back to us. It's distasteful to stand beside such men in battle." "Then don't stand beside them," he said. "Lead men of your own if you must." "Oh, I haven't the patience or the wisdom to lead," Gwale sighed. "But you? Well, I've never met a better captain, a more skilled sword arm, or a mightier sword." "A spell cutter," started Strahd, in what was mostly a grunt. Carl gripped the hilt of his father's sword, the old enchanted blade of the House of Meldor, which legend said was forged from a fallen star, which with it was said the first meteorite had slain the demon king of Krill. It was his inheritance. And as he held it, there remembered the face of Lord Meldor, his adopted father, came as clearly to his vision as the faces of the men before him. He blinked and looked away. He hadn't thought so strongly of Lord Meldor in several years. "You've saved my life twice on this campaign," Gwale said humbly, "and the second time with a bolt so well aimed that I could never have kept a crossbow steady enough to make it." Carl's hand strayed under his shield, hanging from the back of Dobbs' saddle to the crossbow butt sticking out from the weapon's pack. "I only did," he said, as humbly as looking back at them again, "what any of you would have done in my place." "No," said Ter, "I would have screwed the goat on that more than one occasion and gotten us all slaughtered. I'd have taken a waddy down the Vale of the Mists, and we'd all been slain by the darts of the enemy." "And I," said Strahd, would not have known that the hobgoblin was a sorcerer. His illusions would have fooled me, and the demon he summoned would have slain me. I possessed the courage to stand against it. You cut through the illusion and demon both." The memory of the demon, all 12, red, writhing, tentacle-covered feet of it came back to him. The two men who had been near had bravely gone forward, though he'd ordered them back. The demon's fire had slain one. The third pair of his jaws had devoured another. He didn't want to waste time to shudder or cringe at the memory of the thing. He had seen and slain its type before, but he did twinge for the loss of the brave and foolish soldiers. "The eyes of Meldor and his sword are keener and more knowing than mine," admitted Gwael gruffly. Colt stroked the hilt of his sword absently. It was its magic that let him see through the illusion and slay the demon. He answered, "I thank you for your confidence and obedience then, and I thank you for your friendship now." They all stood an awkward moment, and then he said, "Embrace me, and I may ride on with a full heart, and that'll lead me back to you in time." They embraced him, each in turn, after which he mounted good old Dobbs and rode away to the south while they turned their steeds to the north. He rode with a good heart for several miles, but gradually became weighed down with thoughts of his destination and of his sister. The bag of gold bothered him too. He couldn't get used to the weight of it on his belt. Periodically he'd reach down with his left hand and shift it to a different spot, never quite finding a place where he no longer felt the oddness of its presence. There hadn't been many bags of gold in his possession since the death of his adopted father 8 years ago, and he turned them all over to Marisi on his infrequent, uncomfortable, obligatory visits to her house in banishment in Sola-Tay. As it stood, a bag of gold inevitably meant a visit to her, and that prospect habitually filled him with both eagerness and trepidation. As he dutifully turned his horse on the dirt road to the old cobbled highway, he finally untied the money bag altogether and put it into his saddlebag instead. It did nothing to ease his inner turmoil. He'd have to remember not to hand the saddlebag over to any servants at his sister's house when he arrived, tired and hungry that evening, unless he first removed the gold. The hired servants of little old Sola-Tay, he suspected, were not so trustworthy as the family servants he had back in the magnificent war. Dobbs clipped-clopped along the highway at a delusionary pace. He did nothing to encourage it for some time as he ran through his mind the things he'd like to say and shouldn't say and ought to say to beautiful Maurice. At some point she'd ask him, "Why won't you take a portion of this money, buy us some land, and manage it instead of gallivanting all around as a hired sword, my brother?" Her expression would be soft, her smile pleading, her eyes fixed on his. He'd look away from those blue eyes framed in their pale face and sleek dark hair. "It's so dishonorable to live by the sword," he would say. "After all, it's the sword of the house of Meldor, your father's sword, which he defended the empire and won the glory for his house." "No," she'd admit, "there's no dishonor in what you do. You're a hired sword, but not a hired murderer. And you fight time and time again for the weak and the powerless, sometime without pay. I'm very proud of you, my brother. Still, why not buy some land?" He would flush at the praise and then shrug and say, "I'm no good at business or managing an estate, my sister." But he would think and wish to say, "You are no blood of mine, and I am no blood of yours, and you know it. Why must you always call me my brother?" "You could stay with us. Tranus and I miss you. We could live together." She would reach for his hand, and he would not let her take it, for drawing away he would do. "I have to take care of you, and to do that I must be away," he would say. He wished to say, "I can't live with you. It's torture to be around you." But he would never say that. Dutiful son and brother that he was. He would let her keep her soft white hand in his until he withdrew it. You could marry if only you would settle down on an estate, my brother. You could hire a steward to see to the details. He would say, how would I know enough to keep a steward honest? Perhaps one day, and hope she would let it pass there. But what he would want to say is, because of you, I will never marry. But what was the use of renewing the same bitter, nervous thoughts each time he visited? He had to do it, so he might as well get it over with. He patted his horse on the neck and asked of it, "Why are you letting me get so angst-ridden, Dobbs?" Dobbs only nickered loudly and stamped. He laughed suddenly and said, "All right, let's move on." He spurred the horse into a canter that ate the miles. Hey, I hope you liked today's first chapter novel. I'll see you next week. I try to get these out about once a week. Anyway, if you're an author and you think your book would be a great match for this podcast, reach out to me. I'm at Larry Hoy Author, boom, 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 on Facebook. And if you're a reader and you want to check out a great book series, Hit World, the Red Label set. Bullet for Shooter, Demon's Kiss, they're out there on Amazon. You can't miss them. But right now, I am your author, biker, writer, legend, Larry Hoy. Find me on Facebook, Larry Hoy Author, or you've got my YouTube channel. Just ring down there and subscribe. Anyway, I'll see you next week right here on First Chapter Podcast. Bye.